Hi, everybody. Heroku from Salesforce, the next generation platform. Welcome to Myer Media. I'm your host, Jon Myer. Joining us today is Adam, the Senior Director of Product Marketing, and Chris, the Senior Director of Product Management at Heroku. Adam, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here, John.
Chris, thank you so much for joining.
It's wonderful to be here.
All right, before we get started and we talk more about Heroku, Adam, what is your role at Heroku?
Well, ultimately, I head up all of product marketing for Heroku. And so I make sure that we can help convey the value that Heroku brings to our customers.
Something like we're doing today.
This is, one way of providing that.
This is right up your alley. Now, Chris, what do you do at Heroku?
Just a touch under half of the product team reports to me. So runtime, networking, builds, languages, compliance, and a long list of others all roll up to me. So there's no pressure on building the next generation across any of my teams at all.
No pressure at all. I got to get into this because Heroku established in 2007, right?
2007, yep.
Acquired by Salesforce in 2010. We are here at AWS reInvent. You guys had a major announcement happening. I'm actually going to put this over to Chris. What was this major announcement?
Yeah, so it's really, there's three pillars to it, but the biggest and most bold one is that we're rebasing Heroku onto Kubernetes and cloud native standards. So a lot of what Heroku did was pioneering back when it first happened. When we built Heroku Buildpacks, there was no OCI spec, there was no Cloud Native Computing Foundation Buildpack project that was an open standard, and so we built what we had to do to deliver the developer experience that we wanted. And now that the industry's evolved, and in some cases, we helped found the CNCF Cloud Native Buildpack standard with Pivotal. So either the industry's evolved or we helped evolve the industry. And we took a look and decided it was time to make a set of technology changes to evolve the platform. So it's still largely the same Heroku you know and hopefully love today in terms of developer experience, but we're rebasing it on an entirely new set of technologies. We're making a few breaking changes to modernize the platform, like changing our build packs over to cloud native build packs and OCI instead of Heroku proprietary formats. But ultimately, it's about letting us be agile. Why would we run our own container scheduling system when Kubernetes is clearly king of the hill? We can stand on the shoulders of giants. We can move faster. We can build faster. And so that's what the announcement was, is that we're rebasing all of Heroku onto these new cloud native and open standards. And we think that there's a lot of benefits to how we focus our developer time and attention on developer experience instead of infrastructure. Kind of like the Heroku story is, we take the boring away from you and let you focus on what matters. We're taking our own advice and doing the same thing with our platform in a sense.
I got to dive into a little bit of the build packs. When you're talking about these build packs, and I've seen the interface. I actually had the pleasure of working with you guys previously. We talked about, you showed the interface on it. Total PaaS is like very intuitive for somebody to do it, where the engineer obviously taking the boring away. That's actually really key. As an engineer, I want to build more stuff and I don't want to, the heavy list. One of the key things is you talked about these build packs. Can you dive into more?
Yeah, so the git push Heroku main deployment strategy that kind of made us famous back when we first launched it required that we have a lot of magic on our side to detect what language your application was, and we had to do all the heavy work without an Ant or Maven or Gradle or whatever build script to turn your source code into an app. And so we built Buildpacks as our own kind of proprietary standard to do that initially. And now that we have an open source, open standard version that's a CNCF incubating project, we want to adopt those ourselves and really, instead of having something proprietary, capitalize on the benefits of the whole open source ecosystem. One of my favorite things that's happened by virtue of it being open source and using OCI and all those standards is the folks at Bloomberg actually contributed support for generating software bill of materials to the framework. So as I'm looking at our roadmap that has some supply chain security on the horizon, that's one less thing that we have to build ourselves. But it also means that you can use these even if you're not a Heroku customer. We launched .NET support this week as well. And I was looking at the Hacker News thread, and one of the questions was, do I have to care about Heroku to adopt this? And well, we would love that if you did. The answer is no. You can use these to build .NET applications into generic containers that you can deploy anywhere. And so it's not just a Heroku technology. It's something that tries to drive the whole ecosystem of software development forward and bring simplicity across the entire ecosystem.
Adam, one of the things with Heroku is that I remember when it came about, and it was the biggest thing, right? I think the first language was Ruby, right?
Yep.
And since then, 2010 adapted so many other languages to be utilized. Since I felt like it died down, right? I felt like Heroku lost some of its peak, right? It was very quiet for a while.
Right.
And until recently, and I'm talking in the last like 4 to 6 weeks, I'm hearing it all over the place.
Good.
Oh, there was a question. Is it because of this? I want to say a revamp, right? The interface, everything, the integration, the build packs are now you're leaning on partners, people to develop those. You're making things open source, and we will talk about the 12 factor as well. But is it since that you guys are adapting to the engineers, you're adapting to the audience, but why do you feel that the name is now becoming more prevalent out there? You're bringing the value back.
Well, I think a huge factor was about a year ago. There was some reorganization within Salesforce that made Heroku kind of stand out again. And so Heroku suddenly went from just being kind of part of the core platform team to actually being a separate division for Salesforce and being able to actually have other functions associated with the building and the delivery of that value. And so for a while, it was really limited to just the product team and the engineers that were working on it. And now we're actually building back out all of those other ancillary functions that you'd associate with go-to-market. A marketing team, a sales organization that's an overlay organization for Salesforce, a customer success organization, support organization that's specific to Heroku. So being able to have those resources gave us the ability to be able to start actually making some noise again, right? And getting out in front of the customers and letting them know that, hey, we're actually really committing and reinvesting in the platform and the offering and making sure that we're actually updating it to meet the modern needs and add more value for our customers.
I think that's a huge value right now and separating it, when it became part of Salesforce, it might have lost some of that individualization. It might have lost some of that wow and that buzz factor. And since you guys separated it, it's brought that back to not only the engineers, the cloud platform. People are thinking, wow, Heroku, I remember using that. Is it the same anymore, right?
Right.
And after seeing the interface, I was like, as a cloud guy, I was like, wow, I think I really want to play around with this. I was like itching to open up the box and be like, all right, let's see what this can do.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think a big part of it was that we continued to build, and I say Chris and others that were
Well,
there.
you're part of the company. There is a we aspect of it.
But continued to build and innovate and make improvements. But a lot of it wasn't really talked about, right? There was no one whose responsibility it was to be able to get that word out. And I think that with the kind of revamp of that like go-to-market side of the house, there's more resources available to be able to actually share all of these updates, to share all this goodness and work that the team has been doing to be able to move things forward. And that in addition, like with this launch this week, this is a enormous announcement for Heroku. This is the first, major replatforming in, years where they've actually, and realistically, it's like the largest replatforming that's ever been done in the existence of Heroku. So this is a big deal. But this is a culmination of effort that's been taking place slowly, over the past couple of years, from a design and architecture and implementation perspective. And with that, it actually opens up a lot more opportunity for us to do more with the existing ecosystem that has been built up around cloud native, and gives us the flexibility to be able to engage more fully with that ecosystem as well, and make sure that we're keeping pace with the needs of the customers. One of the things that we've seen, and what I think was a big part of this decision to kind of revamp Heroku, was the fact that more and more customers are realizing, as they're adopting Kubernetes, as they're adopting other cloud native technologies that do give them the flexibility to scale, there's also a lot of overhead associated with that. There's a lot of things that folks need to learn. And as you scale out those application workloads, there's a lot of complexity that you confront, especially in a public cloud environment. Even if you're, kind of having some people that are really experienced, there's a lot to, kind of maintain from an operational perspective, and being able to have some consistency in that with regards to a platform is absolutely something that folks are, kind of realizing, oh, this would make my life a lot better, a lot easier, right?
Adam, we're talking about Heroku, the huge announcements that you guys have just released. Chris, I think the audience needs to understand, what are the capabilities now that I can do and go back to what I was doing with Heroku? I need to understand, like, what are you really accomplishing for me that I could focus on other things?
Yeah, so one of the design decisions was that we wanted to keep the developer experience effectively the same. So, I said we're rebasing on Kubernetes, and the first time I said that to our customer advisory board, like, so we're just going to use like kubectl, and no, like we really wanted to stay true to our roots and our core values, back to the 12-factor app set of principles that I know we're going to dive into a little bit more deeply later. But ultimately, like, it's the same developer experience that made Heroku famous, trying to make the complex simple. And we think a lot of those core principles have really worked out well. And so we're describing it as evolutionary, as a new generation, rather than revolutionary, because we're keeping so much of the customer experience because it's aged so gracefully. The problems you had in 2007 about needing simplified ops and things like that are largely the same problems you still have today, if not even worse.
I'd say it turns out that developers today are equally interested in having that kind of reduction in complexity as opposed to the increase.
Exactly.
It's one of those things where, like, I think that this goes for both developers and the operations teams, right? For the people that were on the forefront of, kind of leading the charge with Kubernetes and cloud native, there was a lot of kind of knob twisting and, kind of experimentation with all of the underpinnings that provided the richness for those technologies. But once you start operating them at scale, you start to realize, wait a second, if I fiddle with too many things, being able to maintain that as I scale, both horizontally and vertically, becomes so much more complicated. And so if I'm going to be able to do this, I need to have some consistency and a way to be able to implement that consistency across my entire platform.
There is such a thing as too many variables, too many things to change and tweak, because
Absolutely.
now it becomes X times, 640 some thousand. But like, oh my God, I don't know what I changed. Chris, you were talking about the developer experience back in 2007, and you wanted to maintain that to now. You're still trying to solve that same problem, and we're still having that.
I mean, we did such a good job making complex things simple that, I mean, why would we get rid of git push Heroku main? Like, it made us famous, and it's still just as relevant as it ever was. The amount of complexity behind that and the features that we need to support is really the difference. So the replatforming is about letting us support new networking technologies. We're going to be adding support for Amazon's Global Accelerator, which will speed up networking access by doing points of presence across the globe. We'll be adding support for VPC Private Link, which in particular will make Salesforce integrations, but a number of other integrations that much more secure. These are things that we could have built into the Heroku platform that we have today, the Cedar platform, but we can do them twice as fast on top of a Kubernetes base. The other thing we can do is really change how flexible our offerings are. One of the critiques that we've received over the years is that the sizes of Heroku dynos don't necessarily match up to what businesses need. And Kubernetes gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility and power to really tweak our offerings so they're not kind of tied to the underlying EC2 instances in the same way they have been in the past, where now we can choose our own infrastructure needs independent of our customer offerings. We can make those optimizations. And so it gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility and scalability beyond what our current platform could support. So getting rid of our limits, making things that much more flexible and scalable, and shipping those features faster so that we can stay competitive in an industry that's evolving. So while we're keeping the core developer and operational experience largely the same, it's those new capabilities on top that we're going to bring to market that much faster and more aggressively.
One of the biggest things, one of the questions I really got to ask is, if I am not familiar with Heroku, right? So I said, okay, I'm listening to this and this sounds really cool. I'm a developer. What are you really accomplishing for me within the console that will make my job easier? And what type of visibility are you giving me?
Well, first, if you're a developer, I don't think you're going to be opening the console. I think you're going to be using the CLI. But that aside, ultimately, it's you build your app and then you do a git push to Heroku's git remote. Your app builds and is deployed to production. And you can kind of hand it off to the operations team or your DevOps team at that point to figure out what the right scale is. And you can focus on delivering your features, your code, without having to worry about the scaling, without the backups, without the compliance obligations. It's really about taking all the distractions and the things that are drag on top of you and your productivity away from you, either you've given those wholly to Heroku or making it so that they're trivially easy to work with. So you can focus on doing your job instead of all the things that distract you from your job.
Now, this would not be, a 2024 recording podcast if I didn't ask the next two questions. Chris, I'll leave you to the second one. Adam, cost, right? When I want to do this, what kind of controls and visibility do I have for my cost of my application if I'm using it and I'm pushing out? Who's managing it? Who's automating it? Who's giving me the controls for the best bang for my buck?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from a cost perspective, we try to make sure that we provide the flexibility for people to be able to make sure they're not, kind of blowing out their budget, so setting thresholds to control that. In addition, one of the things that really comes up in the context of cost is thinking about how this is something that is sitting on top of AWS. And, one of the questions that we frequently get is, well, I could just, build this cheaper myself, right? And I think that's kind of where you're going with this is, yeah, I mean, conceivably, there's some kind of overhead of being able to run on top of a PaaS and being able to have that flexibility of the service, being able to take care of a lot of those things for you. But if you look at it compared to the time and effort that you're spending, not only to build and maintain all of that infrastructure yourself, but you also think about it from an opportunity cost perspective, right? If you're spending all that time figuring out, how you want to kind of put things together, how you want to configure things, how you're going to scale things, how you're going to fix the things that break as you're scaling through them, all of that time that you're spending on that means that you're not spending it on actually delivering the value of your product and your service to the customer. And so what we're saying is, hey, look, we're here to help you by taking care of all of that, and gives you the opportunity to redirect those resources and that time back into building value and delivering value to your customers.
I think that's the number one story being told. When I saw the console and I saw the cost visibility of it, we had this question. And one of the question was, well, how's the cost factored into it? And that's one of the things that you take in accountability is not only time is money.
Yeah.
Your effort to put in and to do the work is a cost.
Absolutely.
You factor that in. One of the other things I think you factor in not only the network consumption, everything that's being communicated, the ingress, egress, all those charges that nobody sees until they're in the back or gets the bill and they don't know it's their application causing it. It's somebody else's or it's all of it.
Yeah.
I was about to jump in and say that, like, there's a lot of people who compare like Heroku compute pricing to raw EC2, but the thing to remember is that it's not a direct apples to apples comparison at all. When you buy Heroku compute, that includes bandwidth, that includes builds, that includes a huge number of underlying services that would be billed independently on a number of infrastructure providers, but are all part of the platform as a service aspect of Heroku. That bill, being able to predict your bill, be able to, when you spin up something, know what it's going to cost you at the end of the month, is one of our core values. The whole price tag of the solution is what it says on the tin. There isn't a whole schedule of appendices that you need to factor in as you're figuring out what your actual
just like my cell phone bill, right?
Right.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm only going to be spending 100. Don't forget the services, the fee on top of that
Exactly.
one. I have, you can go into console and get the EC2 instance, but you're telling them this is exactly, there's no surprises.
Well, in addition to that, you think about the number of times that a developer has actually made some type of tweak to a configuration or a setting, and then all of a sudden the next month 10th bill comes in and, it's got a couple extra zeros at the end of it, because that change, unbeknownst to them, did something that they didn't even, kind of fathom could take place. And so the other advantage that you get from, running with a PaaS is that we've obscured a lot of those settings, right? So we're not going to let you make those mistakes. And it gives you the ability to kind of rest assured that, like Chris said, what you see is what you get, and you can have that predictability that you really need when you're actually running an operation at scale.
Chris, my second part of that question I left for you is, can I get the Dynamo equivalent of AI to just do this for me?
Well, one of the things we did launch this week was AI managed inference services. So this is our first foray into AI. We definitely have a whole roadmap coming beyond this, but we like the way that Heroku add-ons work. And if you haven't worked with them before, it's one CLI command or one button press to provision the add-on that then, in this case, is a URL that you plug into your Open API client library for whatever language of choice you have. And it's a fully managed auto-scaling AI service that offers a bunch of the benefits of the industry-leading models from Cohere and Stability and Anthropic that then are just readily available to your app. So you get to choose your model, you provision the add-on, and you're ready to go start making those API requests. We definitely do have the plans to add new dyno types that have GPUs attached to them. So if you really want to get closer to the bare metal experience of building AI applications, that is on our roadmap. But we wanted to start with the make it simple, make it easy, make it fully managed. Don't worry about GPU availability in a region and wonderful things like that everybody has so much fun with.
Well, guys, I got one more question before we wrap it up, and we haven't had a chance to really talk about it. Back in KubeCon, which is a couple of weeks ago, by the time this comes out, it'll be 2 months ago. The question I have for you is, just recently open sourced the 12-factor. Chris, I'm going to give this to you because I feel you're passionate on it. We were kind of talking about it. Real quick, what was the 12-factor and the announcement for open sourcing it?
Yeah, so 12-factor came out in 2011. I'm pretty sure I'm getting my facts straight. And it was really a set of principles that Heroku first published, but became really industry standard. They've been adopted by Spring. They helped define some of the founding principles of CNCF standards over the years. It's really about application disposability. It's about automated builds. It's a set of 12 decisions that you should make architecturally about your app to make it so that it is a effective, scalable, stable cloud native application. And it's been almost 10 years. Cloud natives evolved. So we think the open sourcing of that is about finding the places where we need to update and refresh those and adopting the best practices that the industry has evolved in that time. And so a few examples that we're already seeing from the collaboration across a number of companies, AWS, IBM, Google, obviously Heroku, and Salesforce, just to name a few, is things like workload identity. A best practice for security is to have it so that each of your workloads has its own identity in the form of like a short-lived certificate that represents that this is a specific workload that then it can exchange for short-lived secrets. So instead of having secrets readily available that could potentially be stolen in the event of a breach or things like that, making it so that you have ephemeral, short-lived secrets is increasingly a security best practice. Similarly, there's some work on, why am I drawing a blank on the other new factors? Workload identity, environment variables are another thing that like historically have been used to store secrets, and like that is aged like milk. We need to do better there. And so that really ties into the same thing. So it's about refreshing where these factors need a refresh while staying true to our roots. And so it looks like there's going to be 3 or 4 of them that get a fairly material refresh, and then probably a touch up on the rest of them. But given how material 12-factor was to the evolution of application development across the entire cloud native ecosystem, making it so that this is, again, an industry-wide effort to really modernize this set of principles that have become kind of an API contract between your application and the platform that you're built on is really critical to make it so that they scale really well into the next decade. So I think a set of technology principles that last for a decade is almost unheard of. So I'm going to call that a win.
Guys, what you're doing at Heroku is awesome. The announcements that are happening, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you guys joining the show. Thank you so much, Chris.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Adam, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, John.
Yeah, this has been a pleasure. All right, everybody. This has been Heroku from Salesforce, the next generation platform. Thank you for watching the Jon Myer podcast powered by Myer Media. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify because guess what? We're out of here.